Picture this. You're scrolling through your husband's family photos after Christmas dinner, and suddenly you notice something that makes your blood run cold. Every single family photo from the past 2 years has been digitally altered. Your face has been completely removed and replaced with someone else's. Your sister-in-law's face, to be exact. And when you confront the family about it at the dinner table, what comes out next changes everything forever. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The first time I noticed something was off was during Thanksgiving 2023. My husband Derek and I had been married for 3 years, and I thought I'd finally found my place in the Martinez family. His parents, Robert and Linda, had always been cordial but distant. His sister Jessica, however, seemed to go out of her way to make me feel welcome, or so I believed. That November evening, Linda was showing the family photos from Derek's cousins' wedding the previous summer on her tablet. As she swiped through the images, I caught glimpses of what looked like our family group shots. But something felt wrong. In every photo where I should have been standing next to Derek, Jessica was there instead. Not in addition to me. Instead of me. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I was seeing things wrong. The lighting in the living room was dim and everyone was crowded around the small screen. Maybe I was just confused about which photos were being shown. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. "Can I see that photo again?" I asked Linda, trying to keep my voice casual. "Which one, honey?" she replied, but she'd already moved past it. Shot 3. One with Derek in the blue suit, the family group shot. "Oh, that one's a little blurry. Let me find a better one." She kept swiping, never returning to the image I'd asked about. Derek was deep in conversation with his father about work, completely oblivious to what was happening. Jessica sat across from me, helping her 5-year-old daughter Emma with a coloring book, looking like the picture of innocence. The rest of that evening felt surreal. Every time Linda showed family photos on her phone or tablet, I found myself scrutinizing them with laser focus. But with everyone gathered around, talking and laughing, I couldn't get a clear look at any of them. The nagging feeling in my stomach grew stronger with each passing hour. When we got home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about those photos. Derek was already in bed, scrolling through his phone when I brought it up. "Honey, did you notice anything weird about the photos your mom was showing tonight?" "Weird how?" he asked, not looking up from his screen. "I don't know. Something seemed off about the family shots from Mike's wedding. Mom takes like 1,000 photos at every event. Half of them are probably blurry or have someone blinking. You know how she is." He laughed and continued scrolling. I wanted to push further, but I couldn't explain what I'd seen without sounding paranoid. "How do you tell your husband that you think his family is somehow erasing you from their photographs?" It sounded insane, even in my own head. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to the Martinez family's social media presence. Linda was very active on Facebook, constantly posting photos from family gatherings, holidays, and special occasions. As I scrolled through her posts from the past 2 years, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. In every single photo where Derek and I had been together, I was nowhere to be found. Instead, Jessica stood beside him, often with her arm linked through, his or her hand on his shoulder. The poses were identical to ones I remembered taking, but Jessica's face had replaced mine with frightening precision. My hands shook as I screenshot after screenshot, creating a growing folder of evidence on my phone. There was the photo from Derek's birthday party in March, where I distinctly remembered wearing my red dress and standing between Derek and his father. In Linda's Facebook version, Jessica wore an identical red dress in the exact same pose. There was the Easter brunch photo where I'd been holding Emma on my lap. In the posted version, Jessica held her daughter in the same position, wearing the same pastel blue blouse I'd worn that day. The most disturbing discovery came when I found photos from our own wedding reception. Linda had posted an album titled Derek's Special Day just a few months after our wedding. As I scrolled through the images, my breath caught in my throat. The ceremony photos were normal, Derek and I exchanging vows, kissing, walking down the aisle. But every single reception photo had been altered. In the family portraits, Jessica stood where I should have been in my wedding dress. The dancing photos showed Derek spinning Jessica around the dance floor in my exact gown. Even the cake cutting ceremony featured Jessica's hand over Derek's as they sliced into our 3-tiered vanilla cake with raspberry filling. I dropped my phone, my entire body trembling. This wasn't just casual photo editing. This was systematic, methodical replacement. Someone had spent hours carefully removing me from these images and inserting Jessica with surgical precision. The attention to detail was remarkable and terrifying. Matching. Clothing, identical poses, even the same jewelry I'd worn. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the family events from the past 3 years, wondering how many other photos had been altered without my knowledge. How long had this been going on? Was Derek aware of it? Did the entire family? No? The next morning, I decided to do some detective work. I called Derek's Aunt Patricia, who lived in Oregon and had a strained relationship with Linda. Patricia had always been kind to me, and I hoped she might provide some insight without making things awkward. Patricia, this might sound like a strange question, but do you have any photos from Derek's wedding reception? I'm putting together a scrapbook and realized I don't have many pictures from that night. Oh, honey, I have tons. Let me email them to you right now. I took so many because Linda was being weird about the photographer that night. Weird how? Oh, you know how she gets about Jessica. She kept trying to get the photographer to take extra shots with Jessica in them, like she was part of the wedding party or something. It was a little awkward, honestly. Jessica kept stepping into family shots where she didn't really belong. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Well, like during the family portraits, she kept inserting herself between you and Derek, or between Derek and his parents. The photographer looked confused because Jessica wasn't on the shot list, but Linda kept insisting. And then, during the reception, Jessica kept changing into outfits that were similar to yours. She must have brought 3 different dresses that night. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was more disturbing than I'd imagined. Patricia's photos arrived an hour later, and they confirmed my worst fears. In her unedited images, I could see Jessica lurking at the edges of family shots, wearing outfits nearly identical to mine. There were photos of her changing clothes in the hallway outside the reception hall. Most chilling of all, there were several shots of Jessica posing alone in scenarios identical to ones I'd posed for, cutting the cake by herself, dancing alone, even sitting in the bride's chair at the head table when I'd stepped away to use the restroom. She hadn't just been photoshopped into these pictures. She'd been preparing for this replacement all along. I spent the entire weekend going through every photo Patricia had sent, cross-referencing them with the versions posted on Linda's Facebook. The level of planning and execution was staggering. Jessica had essentially created a parallel version of my wedding reception, complete with costume changes and choreographed poses. But why? What could possibly motivate someone to go to such elaborate lengths? And how far back did this conspiracy go? I decided to reach out to other family members who might have original photos. Derek's cousin Mike, whose wedding had been the source of my first suspicions, was happy to share his unedited photos from that day. The results were exactly what I'd feared. In Mike's originals, Jessica appeared in the background of family shots, always positioned so that she could later be moved to replace me. She wore a dress almost identical to mine in color and style. During the reception, she'd apparently followed me around, mimicking my poses and interactions with family members. The more I investigated, the more elaborate the deception became. I found evidence going back to Derek's and my engagement party, our first Christmas as a couple, even casual family barbecues. In every single instance, Jessica had been creating alternative versions of events where she played the role of Derek's partner instead of me. By Sunday night, I had compiled a comprehensive folder of evidence, original photos from other family members, screenshots of the edited versions from Linda's social media, and a timeline showing the systematic nature of the replacement campaign. The question now was what to do with this information. Confronting Derek seemed like the logical first step, but I was terrified of his reaction. Would he believe me? Would he think I was being paranoid or jealous? Or worse, was he somehow complicit in this bizarre scheme? I decided to approach the conversation carefully, starting with just a few examples rather than overwhelming him with the full scope of what I'd discovered. Derek, I need to show you something, and I need you to keep an open mind. He looked up from his laptop, sensing the seriousness in my voice. Okay, what's going on? I showed him my phone, displaying one of Patricia's unedited wedding photos side by side with Linda's Facebook version. Look at these two pictures. Do you notice anything different? He squinted at the screen, comparing the images. At first, he didn't see it. But then his expression changed as the realization hit him. Wait, is that? How is Jessica in our wedding photo? And why is she wearing a dress like yours? That's what I've been trying to figure out. Look at this one. I showed him another comparison, then another. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Derek's face went pale as he processed what he was seeing. This doesn't make sense. Why would Mom post fake photos? And when did Jessica even take these pictures? I don't think they're fake, Derek. I think Jessica actually posed for all of these shots. At our wedding, at Mike's wedding, at every family event for the past 3 years. And then someone, probably your mother, has been editing me out and putting Jessica in my place. Derek was quiet for a long time, scrolling through the evidence I'd compiled. His hands shook slightly as he reached the wedding reception photos. "This is insane," he whispered. "Why would they do this? What's the point?" I don't know, but Derek, this isn't just casual photo editing. This has been planned and executed over years. Jessica has been systematically creating alternative versions of our entire relationship. Derek set the phone down and rubbed his face with both hands. I need to talk to Mom about this. This is really disturbing. Before you do that, I think we need to figure out how deep this goes. And we need to decide how we want to handle it as a team. What I didn't tell Derek was that I'd already decided how I wanted to handle it. Christmas dinner was just 3 weeks away, and the entire Martinez family would be gathered around one table. If Jessica and Linda wanted to play games with family photos, I was ready to bring the whole charade into the light. I had spent 3 years trying to fit into this family, accepting their cold treatment and subtle exclusions as just part of the adjustment period. I'd made excuses for their behavior, blamed myself for not trying hard enough, and convinced myself that things would get better with time. But this wasn't about me not fitting in. This was about a deliberate, calculated campaign to erase me from their family history and replace me with someone they preferred, and I was done being polite about it. Christmas dinner was going to be very interesting this year. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with tense conversations and disturbing discoveries. Derek had initially wanted to confront his mother immediately, but I convinced him to wait until we had a complete understanding of the situation. Something told me there were more layers to this conspiracy than we'd uncovered. My instincts proved correct when Derek's phone buzzed during dinner 3 nights later. It was a text from Jessica with a photo attachment. The message read, "Can't wait to see everyone for Christmas. Look what I found while cleaning out my closet." The photo showed Jessica holding up a dress identical to one I'd worn to Derek's company Christmas party the previous year. Not similar, identical. Same designer, same color, same intricate beadwork along the neckline. I remembered that dress vividly because it had been expensive, a splurge I'd saved up for months to afford. Derek stared at the photo, his jaw clenched. How does she have that dress? I don't know, but I'm starting to think this goes way deeper than photo manipulation. I screenshot the message before it could disappear. Derek, what if she's been buying copies of my clothes? What if she's been preparing for these photo replacements by dressing exactly like me? That night, I went through my closet with new eyes, mentally cataloging every outfit I'd worn to Martinez family events. Then I cross-referenced those outfits with the edited photos I'd found. The matches were perfect, down to accessories and jewelry. The next morning, I decided to do something that felt slightly unethical but absolutely necessary. I called Linda directly. Hi, Linda. It's Sarah. I hope I'm not bothering you. Oh, hello. Dear? Not at all. What can I do for you? I'm putting together a photo album for Derek's birthday, and I was wondering if you could send me some of your favorite family photos from the past few years. You know, the special moments and holidays. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. Of course, sweetheart. I'll gather some together and send them over. That's so thoughtful. And Linda, could you include some of the candid shots, too? Sometimes those capture the best memories. Candid shots? You know, the ones where people aren't posing, the natural moments. Another pause. I'll see what I have. Linda's photos arrived that afternoon, and they revealed something I hadn't expected. Mixed in with the obviously edited family portraits were dozens of candid shots that hadn't been altered. In these unguarded moments, I could see the real family dynamics playing out. There were photos of Jessica constantly positioning herself next to Derek during conversations, her hand frequently touching his arm or shoulder. There were shots of Linda and Jessica having intense private discussions in corners while I was occupied with other family members. Most telling were the photos that showed Jessica watching me, studying my posture, my gestures, even the way I interacted with Derek. In one particularly unsettling image, Jessica stood behind a doorway, partially hidden, observing Derek and me as we looked through wedding albums. Her expression was focused and calculating, like she was memorizing details. But the most disturbing discovery came in the form of a photo Linda had probably included by mistake. It showed Jessica's bedroom at the Martinez house, and there, spread, across her bed were multiple outfits that looked suspiciously familiar. I could make out at least 3 dresses that were identical or nearly identical to ones in my wardrobe. I called Derek at work immediately. Derek, you need to come home. I found something else. Sarah, I'm in the middle of a client presentation. Can this wait? No, it really can't. Trust me on this. 20 minutes later, Derek walked through our front door, looking stressed and concerned. I showed him Linda's accidental bedroom photo. Look at this picture. Really look at it. Derek studied the image, zooming in on the clothes scattered across Jessica's bed. His face went white. Those are your dresses. Not just similar, Derek. Those are exact duplicates. Look at the blue one with the silver buttons. I wore that to your parents' anniversary dinner. The green dress with the lace sleeves. That was from Easter last year. She has copies of everything. Derek sat down heavily on our couch. This is beyond weird, Sarah. I don't even know what this is. It's identity theft, Derek. She's been systematically studying me, copying my style, and then creating alternate versions of our entire relationship where she plays my role. But why? What does she get out of this? I'd been thinking about that. Question for days, and I was starting to form a theory that made my stomach churn. Derek, has Jessica ever been married? Seriously dated anyone long-term? No, not really. She's had a few boyfriends over the years, but nothing serious. Mom always says she's too focused on Emma to prioritize dating. How old was Emma when Jessica had her? I don't know, maybe 22? 23? And Emma's father? Some guy Jessica dated briefly in college. He's never been in the picture. Why? I pulled up Emma's Facebook profile, which I'd found through Jessica's account. The little girl was adorable, with dark hair and brown eyes that looked remarkably familiar. Derek, look at Emma. Really look at her. He studied the photos of his niece, and I watched as understanding slowly dawned on his face. Oh my God. She looks just like you did as a kid, doesn't she? Derek nodded slowly, his face pale. But that's impossible. Jessica and I never. I don't think you did anything, Derek. But I think Jessica has been harboring feelings for you that go way beyond normal sibling affection. And I think Emma might be the result of some very creative planning on Jessica's part. What are you saying? I'm saying I think Jessica has been in love with you for years, possibly since you were teenagers. And I think she's been trying to create a fantasy where she's your partner instead of your sister. Derek stood up abruptly, pacing across our living room. That's insane, Sarah. You're talking about. That's really disturbing. I know how it sounds, but look at the evidence. The photo manipulation, the identical clothes, the way she studies me and mimics my behavior. This isn't random, Derek. This is someone who's been obsessed with replacing me in your life. Over the next few days, we uncovered more disturbing details. Derek reluctantly went through old family photos and videos, looking for signs of Jessica's unusual behavior toward him. What he found confirmed my worst suspicions. In home videos from their teenage years, Jessica consistently positioned herself as Derek's date to family functions. At Derek's high school graduation, she wore a dress more appropriate for a girlfriend than a sister. During Derek's college years, she visited his campus frequently, often staying overnight in his dorm room despite having her own apartment nearby. Most telling was a video from Derek's 21st birthday party. Jessica had organized the entire celebration, decorating his apartment and acting as hostess. In the video, she moved through the party like a girlfriend would, greeting guests, serving food, and staying close to Derek's side all night. At one point, she even jokingly referred to herself as the birthday boy's better half. How did I never see this? Derek asked after watching the footage. How was I so oblivious? Because she's your sister, and you trusted her. You had no reason to look for romantic undertones in her behavior. But my parents must have noticed. My mom especially. She notices everything. That's when the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Derek, what if your mom didn't just notice? What if she's been encouraging this? What do you mean? Think about it. Your mother has been the one posting the edited photos. She's been the one facilitating Jessica's presence at every family event. What if she actually prefers the fantasy version of your life where you're with Jessica instead of me? Derek was quiet for a long time, processing this possibility. Finally, he spoke. You know, Mom has always been weird about my relationships. Every girl I ever brought home she found something wrong with. She was especially cold to my high school girlfriend Amy and my college girlfriend Rachel. But she's been warm to Jessica. More than warm. She's always talking about how perfect Jessica is, how she's such a good mother, how she sacrifices so much for the family. And now she's literally editing me out of family photos to replace me with Jessica. The full scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. This wasn't just Jessica's individual obsession. It was a family-wide delusion being actively maintained by Linda. Derek's father, Robert, was either oblivious or complicit, but Linda was definitely the mastermind behind the photo manipulation. Campaign. That weekend, Derek decided to visit his parents alone to do some reconnaissance. He told them he wanted to help organize old family photos as a Christmas gift project. What he discovered in their home office was damning. Linda had an entire filing system dedicated to family photos, but it wasn't just storage, it was an editing operation. She had multiple computers, professional photo editing software, and boxes of printed photos organized by event and year. Most shocking was a folder labeled Future Projects that contained photos of Jessica alone, clearly posed to be inserted into future family pictures. Derek also found Linda's computer open to a folder called Sarah Replacements. Inside were hundreds of edited photos spanning our entire relationship, plus templates for future edits. There were even practice versions where Linda had experimented with different editing techniques to make Jessica's insertions look more natural. But the most disturbing discovery was a handwritten notebook filled with detailed plans for future events. Linda had written out scenarios for our potential children, detailing how Jessica could be inserted into parenting photos and family portraits. She'd even planned out Christmas morning photos for the next 5 years, with Jessica playing the Sal role of Derek's wife and Emma positioned as Derek's daughter. When Derek called me that evening, his voice was shaking. "Sarah, you were right about everything. It's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "They're not just editing existing photos, they're planning future ones. Mom has a whole notebook with scenarios for when we have kids, when we buy a house, when we celebrate anniversaries. In every scenario, Jessica replaces you." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. This is my family, Sarah. As disturbing as this is, these are the people who raised me. Derek, they're actively trying to erase me from your life and replace me with your sister. This isn't just strange behavior, this is psychological warfare. I know. I need some time to figure out how to handle this." But time was something we didn't have. Christmas dinner was in 4 days, and I'd already made my decision about how to handle the situation. That Monday morning, I went shopping. Not for Christmas presents, but for props. I bought a poster board, a printer, and laminating sheets. Then I went to work creating a presentation that would expose the truth in front of the entire Martinez family. I carefully selected 20 of the most damning photo comparisons, showing the original versions alongside Linda's edited Facebook posts. I arranged them chronologically, starting with our engagement party and ending with our wedding reception. Each comparison was labeled with dates and sources, creating an undeniable timeline of systematic deception. The centerpiece of my presentation was a side-by-side comparison of 2 family portraits from our wedding day. In Patricia's original photo, I stood between Derek and his parents, wearing my wedding dress and smiling radiantly. In Linda's Facebook version, Jessica stood in the exact same position, wearing an identical dress, with my face completely removed from the image. I also included screenshots of Jessica's text messages, photos of her duplicate clothing collection, and a timeline showing her presence at every family event where photos had later been manipulated. Derek didn't know about my Christmas dinner plans. I decided this was something I needed to do alone, without putting him in the position of having to choose between supporting me and protecting his family's feelings. On Christmas Eve, I practiced my presentation in our bathroom mirror, timing myself to ensure I could get through everything before anyone could stop me or change the subject. Christmas Day arrived with an unusual warmth for December in Ohio. The Martinez family gathered at Linda and Robert's house at 2 o'clock for their traditional Christmas dinner. Everyone was there, Derek's aunts and uncles, his cousins, even Patricia, who had flown in from Oregon. Jessica arrived wearing a red dress that looked remarkably similar to one I'd worn to last year's Christmas dinner. She carried Emma on her hip and made a grand entrance, kissing Derek on the cheek and complimenting Linda's cooking. As we sat around the dining room table, Linda began her traditional Christmas speech about family, gratitude, and the memories they'd created together over the past year. She gestured toward a wall of family photos, talking about how precious these captured moments were to her. "Photos are so important," she said, "because they preserve our happiest memories exactly as they happened." That was my cue. "Actually, Linda, I'd like to talk about family photos too." The dining room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at me, forks suspended halfway to their mouths. Linda's smile faltered for just a moment before returning with forced brightness. "Of course, dear. What about family photos? I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room on me. Derek's face had gone pale. He knew something was coming, but not what. Jessica continued cutting Emma's turkey, but I noticed her movements had become mechanical, precise. Well, I've been putting together a little project of my own, a collection of some of our most precious family memories. I pulled out my presentation folder. I thought everyone might enjoy taking a trip down memory lane. I moved to the empty wall space near Linda's photo display and began taping up my first comparison. The engagement party photos, Patricia's original showing me laughing with Derek's, arm around my waist, and Linda's Facebook version showing Jessica in the identical pose, wearing a nearly identical dress. This is from Derek's and my engagement party in March of 2022. Isn't it interesting how memory can play tricks on us? Linda's face had drained of color, but she maintained her composure. Sarah, honey, what exactly are you doing? I'm sharing. Some family memories, Linda. Just like you do on Facebook. I taped up the second comparison, Easter Brunch 2022. This one's from Easter. Look how beautifully Jessica coordinated her outfit with mine that day. Murmurs started around the table. Derek's cousin Mike leaned forward, studying the photos with confusion. Patricia's mouth had fallen open. She recognized her own photographs being displayed alongside manipulated versions. Sarah, Derek said quietly, maybe this isn't the right time. Actually, Derek, this is the perfect time, when everyone's here together, sharing memories. I continued putting up comparisons, my hands steady despite my racing heart. Here's your birthday party from last March, and here's the anniversary dinner for your parents. Jessica had stopped pretending to eat. Emma, sensing tension, looked around the table with wide eyes. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably but said nothing. I don't understand what you're trying to prove, Linda said, her voice tight. I'm not trying to prove anything, Linda. I'm just sharing photos. But since you asked, maybe you could help me understand something. I taped up the wedding reception comparison, the crown jewel of my presentation. This is from Derek's and my wedding day, the same moment captured by two different photographers. The room erupted. What the hell is this? Derek's uncle Tom demanded, standing up to examine the photos more closely. How is Jessica in Sarah's wedding dress? Patricia asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. This has to be some kind of mistake, Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jessica finally looked up from her plate. Her face was flushed, but her expression was defiant rather than ashamed. Maybe some people just photograph better, in certain situations. The casualness of her response sent a chill through the room. Here was a woman who had been systematically inserting herself into someone else's marriage photos, and she was treating it like a minor aesthetic preference. Photograph better? I repeated. Jessica, these aren't just photographs. These are edited images where I've been completely removed and replaced with you, in my wedding dress, at my wedding reception. I think there's been some misunderstanding, Linda interjected, but her voice wavered. Actually, I think the understanding is becoming very clear. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of evidence I'd compiled. Would you like me to show everyone the photo of Jessica's bedroom, Linda? The one you accidentally sent me, showing all the duplicate dresses? Linda's fork clattered onto her plate. Jessica's eyes darted to her mother, a look of panic finally, breaking through her composure. Or maybe, I continued, we could discuss the detailed planning notebook Derek found in your home office. The one with scenarios mapped out for the next 5 years, showing how Jessica could be edited into photos of our future children. Derek stood up abruptly. Mom, tell me Sarah is lying. Tell me you don't have a notebook planning out fake family photos. The silence stretched unbearably. Linda looked around the table at the faces of her extended family. Patricia's horrified expression, Tom's disgust, Mike's confusion, and Derek's desperate plea for denial. It's not what it looks like, Linda finally whispered. Then what is it? Derek's voice cracked. Because it looks like you've been systematically erasing my wife from our family history and replacing her with my sister. Jessica belongs in this family, Linda said, her voice growing stronger. She's been here through everything. She's Emma's mother. She's devoted to all of us. She deserves to be in these memories. She is in the family, Patricia snapped. She's Derek's sister. But she's not his wife, Linda. Sarah is. Sarah doesn't understand our family, Jessica spoke up, her voice cold. She doesn't fit in here. She never has. The words hung in the air like a challenge. This was the moment I'd been building toward, the confrontation that would either destroy this family or force them to face the truth about what they'd been doing. You're right, Jessica, I said calmly. I don't understand a family that would spend 3 years systematically erasing someone from their photographs. I don't understand a family that would manipulate wedding photos to create a fantasy where a sister replaces a wife. And I don't understand why a grown woman would spend years copying my clothes, studying my mannerisms, and positioning herself as her brother's romantic partner. That's not what I've been doing, Jessica protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Then, explain the clothes, Jessica. Explain why you own exact duplicates of dresses I've worn to family events. Explain why you texted Derek a photo of yourself wearing one of those dresses just last week. Derek pulled out his phone and showed the text to the table. Several family members leaned in to look, their expressions growing more disturbed. Explain why, in every single edited photo, you're not just present. You're positioned exactly where I was, wearing what I wore, posing how I posed. Maybe, Jessica said, her voice rising, it's because I would have been a better choice. The words exploded across the table like a bomb. Derek recoiled as if he'd been slapped. Linda gasped. Even Emma looked up from her coloring book, sensing the shift in energy. A better choice for what? Derek asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. For you, Jessica said simply. I've always been here, Derek. I've always supported you, understood you, been there when you needed someone. I never left for college like your other girlfriends. I never had other priorities. It's always been about family, about us. Jessica? Robert said weakly. Derek is your brother. Half-brother, Jessica corrected quickly. We're not even fully related. And I've loved him longer than anyone else at this table. The admission sent shockwaves through the room. This wasn't just about photo manipulation or identity theft. This was a declaration of romantic love from a sister to her brother, made in front of their entire family. Derek stood frozen, his face cycling through expressions of horror, disgust, and profound sadness. Jessica, what are you saying? I'm saying I've been in love with you since we were teenagers. I'm saying Emma is yours, Derek. I made sure of that. And I'm saying that this marriage, she gestured dismissively toward me, is just an obstacle that we've been politely working around. The dining room erupted in chaos. Patricia started shouting about family therapy and inappropriate boundaries. Tom demanded to know if Derek had known about any of this. Robert sat in stunned silence, his face buried in his hands. But Derek's reaction was what mattered most. He looked at Jessica with an expression of complete revulsion. Emma is mine? What? Does that mean, Jessica? What did you do? I saved some of your biological material from when you lived at home during college breaks. I used it to make sure Emma would be yours. The words were so clinical, so calculated, that they took a moment to fully register. When they did, Derek stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. You stole my sperm? You artificially inseminated yourself with stolen genetic material? I ensured our family's future, Jessica said, her voice taking on an almost evangelical tone. Emma is our daughter, Derek. She's the child we were meant to have together. You're insane, Derek whispered. You're completely, absolutely insane. Linda, who had been silent through Jessica's confession, finally spoke. Jessica loves this family more than anyone. She's devoted her entire life to keeping us together. Committing sexual assault, Patricia said bluntly. By stealing biological material and using it without consent. By creating a child through deception and theft. By creating our grandchild, Linda countered. Emma is part of this family, whatever the circumstances. I watched this horrific family drama unfold with a mixture of vindication and revulsion. My investigation had been correct, but the reality was far worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just photo manipulation. It was reproductive coercion, identity theft, and a level of obsessive behavior that crossed every conceivable boundary. Derek looked around the table at his family. His mother defending the indefensible. His sister who had violated him in the most fundamental way. His father who couldn't even meet his eyes. "We're leaving," he said quietly. "Sarah, get your purse. We're leaving right now." "Derek, please," Linda pleaded. "Don't let this ruin Christmas. We can work through this as a family." "Family?" Derek laughed bitterly. "You call this family? You've been erasing my wife from photographs for 3 years. Jessica has been stealing my genetic material and creating children without my knowledge or consent, and you've all been acting like this is normal, acceptable behavior." "It's not that simple," Linda protested. "It's exactly that simple, Mom. You've all been living in a fantasy where Jessica is my wife instead of Sarah. You've been so invested in this delusion that you've committed actual crimes to maintain it." Derek moved toward the door, and I followed. Him. Behind us, the arguments continued. Patricia demanding explanations, Tom threatening to call authorities, Linda trying to minimize the situation, and Jessica sitting in defiant silence. As we reached the front door, Derek turned back to face his family one last time. "I want a DNA test to confirm Emma's parentage. If she's my biological child, I'll take responsibility for her welfare. But I will never, ever forgive what you did to create her. And Jessica?" He looked directly at his sister. "Stay away from me. Stay away from my wife. If I see you anywhere, near our home or our lives, I'm calling the police." "Derek, you can't mean that," Linda called out. "I mean every word. You've made your choice, Mom. You chose Jessica's fantasy over reality. You chose her obsession over your son's actual marriage. Now you get to live with the consequences." We walked out into the cold December air, leaving behind a family in complete meltdown. As we got into our car, I could hear shouting from inside the house, voices raised in anger, accusation, and desperate attempts at damage control. Derek sat in the driver's seat for several minutes without starting the engine, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. "How did I miss this?" he asked quietly. "How did I live with these people my entire life and never see what they were really like?" "Because you loved them," I said. "And because the truth was so extreme that no reasonable person would have suspected it. Emma might be my daughter. We'll figure that out. If she is, we'll make sure she's protected and loved. But Derek, what Jessica did, that's not your fault. That's not something you could have prevented or predicted. I feel like my entire life has been a lie. Every family memory, every holiday, every photo. How much of it was real?" I didn't have an answer for that. The Martinez family's dysfunction ran so deep and had been hidden so skillfully that it would probably take years to fully understand the scope of the deception. As we drove home through the quiet Christmas evening streets, I realized that this confrontation had been just the beginning. There would be legal implications to consider: reproductive crimes, harassment, identity theft. There would be family relationships to rebuild or permanently sever. And there would be the question of Emma, an innocent child caught in the middle of her mother's elaborate delusion. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe freely. The gaslighting was over. The systematic erasure had been exposed. Whatever came next, at least we would be facing it with the truth. The week following Christmas was a blur of legal consultations, DNA testing arrangements, and sleepless nights. Derek barely spoke for the first 3 days, moving through our house like a ghost. The magnitude of his family's betrayal had shaken him to his core. On December 28th, our doorbell rang at 7 in the morning. Through the peephole, I saw Patricia, standing on our porch, holding 2 coffee cups and looking exhausted. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said when I opened the door. "But I couldn't sleep and I figured you two might need someone to talk to who isn't completely insane." Patricia had stayed at the Martinez house for 2 days after Christmas, witnessing the complete implosion of the family. What she told us, over coffee, painted an even more disturbing picture of the aftermath. Jessica locked herself in her childhood bedroom with Emma and refused to come out. Linda spent hours outside the door, begging her to explain things properly so the family could work through this misunderstanding. Your father-in-law, bless his heart, finally found his backbone and demanded that Linda show him the photo, editing set up in the office. "What did he find?" Derek asked, speaking for the first time in days. "Everything you described and more." Linda had been documenting this project like it was a legitimate family history preservation effort. She had detailed notes about which editing techniques worked best, which family members were most likely to notice inconsistencies, even backup plans for if the deception was ever discovered. Patricia pulled out her phone and showed us photos she'd taken of Linda's workspace. The organization was meticulous and deeply unsettling. Folders were labeled by year and event, with subcategories for original photos, Jessica preparation shots, and final versions. There were even folders labeled future planning and emergency alternatives. The most disturbing part, Patricia continued, was a folder called Sarah Analysis. Linda had been studying your social media, documenting your clothing choices, your mannerisms, even your speech patterns. There were pages of notes about how to help Jessica better mimic your behavior. Derek set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. "They turned my wife into a research project. It gets worse. I found communications between Linda and Jessica dating back to your engagement. They'd been planning this photo replacement campaign since before your wedding. Jessica had been shopping for duplicate outfits and practicing poses for months before each event." The scope of the premeditation was staggering. This hadn't been a gradual descent into delusion. It had been a carefully orchestrated campaign from the very beginning of Derek's and my relationship. "What about Emma?" I asked. "Is she okay?" Patricia's expression darkened. "That child is trapped in the middle of a nightmare. Jessica keeps telling her that Daddy Derek is going to come live with them soon, and that Sarah was just temporary. Emma is 5 years old, Sarah. She doesn't understand any of this, but she's absorbing every bit of the toxicity." Derek stood up abruptly and walked to our kitchen window, staring out at our snow-covered backyard. "I need to know if she's really mine. The DNA test results should be back next week." "Derek," Patricia said gently, "whatever those results say, you need to understand that you're the victim here. Even if Emma is biologically yours, what Jessica did was assault. She stole your genetic material without consent and used it to create a pregnancy. That's not something you participated in. That's something that was done to you." Over the following days, more family members reached out. Derek's cousin Mike called to apologize for not noticing the obvious signs of manipulation in the photos. Tom, Derek's uncle, offered to testify if legal action became necessary. Even some of Derek's extended family members who hadn't been at Christmas dinner began coming forward with their own stories of Jessica's strange behavior over the years. Mike's wife, Jennifer, called with particularly disturbing information. "I always thought Jessica was a little weird around Derek, but I figured it was just sister stuff. But looking back now, there were so many red flags. At Mike's wedding, she kept trying to insert herself into couples' photos with Derek, even though she wasn't part of the wedding party. During the reception, she asked the photographer to take just a few shots of her and Derek together, claiming it was for a family album. Did the photographer agree? I asked. Yeah, and Jessica had brought this whole bag of outfit changes. She kept disappearing to the bathroom and coming back in different dresses. At the time, I thought maybe she was just indecisive about what to wear. Now I realize she was creating options for photo editing. Jennifer's account confirmed what I'd suspected. Jessica's behavior at events had been deliberately calculated to facilitate the later photo manipulations. She hadn't just been present at these gatherings, she'd been working, creating the raw material needed for Linda's editing projects. The DNA test results arrived on January 3rd, delivered in a plain envelope that sat on our kitchen counter for an hour before Derek found the courage to open it. I sat beside him as he read the official laboratory report. 99.7% probability, he read aloud. Emma is my biological daughter. The confirmation hit like a physical blow. Derek crumpled the paper and buried his face in his hands. She's mine. That innocent little girl is mine, and she's being raised by a woman who violated me to create her. We'll figure out how to protect Emma, I said, though I had no idea how. But Derek, you need to understand that being her biological father doesn't make you responsible for Jessica's crimes. I know, but I can't just ignore her existence. Emma didn't ask for any of this. That afternoon, Derek called our family lawyer, Richard Chen, to discuss our options. Richard had handled our real estate transactions and will preparation, but this situation was far beyond his usual practice. After hearing our story, he referred us to his colleague, Maria Santos, who specialized in family law and sexual crimes. Our meeting with Maria the following day was both enlightening and terrifying. After reviewing our documentation, the photo, evidence, Patricia's pictures of Linda's editing setup, and the DNA test results, Maria explained the legal implications of what Jessica had done. In Ohio, what Jessica did constitutes sexual assault. Using someone's genetic material without consent to create a pregnancy is a felony. The photo manipulation campaign could be prosecuted as harassment and identity theft. And if Linda was complicit in the reproductive assault, which seems likely given the level of coordination required, she could face conspiracy charges. What about Emma? Derek asked. If I press charges against Jessica, what happens to my daughter? That's complicated. Emma is your biological child, which gives you parental rights. But Jessica is also her biological mother and has been her primary caregiver since birth. If Jessica is arrested and convicted, you could petition for custody, but it would be a complex process. Maria explained that pursuing criminal charges would likely result in a lengthy public legal battle. Jessica would almost certainly claim the reproductive assault was consensual, despite the obvious evidence to the contrary. Linda might argue that the photo editing was just artistic expression or family preservation efforts. However, Maria continued, even if the criminal case is challenging, you have strong grounds for civil litigation. Jessica's actions have caused demonstrable harm to your marriage, your mental health, and your sense of personal autonomy. The financial and emotional damages could be substantial. What about a restraining order? I asked. Can we keep Jessica away from us while we figure out the next steps? Absolutely. Given the documented harassment and the reproductive assault, I can have temporary protective orders in place by tomorrow. We can also include provisions for supervised visitation with Emma, if Derek chooses to exercise his parental rights. That evening, Derek and I sat in our living room, trying to process the impossible situation we'd found ourselves in. Our Christmas revelation had led to the discovery of crimes that could send Jessica to prison and potentially give us custody of a 5-year-old girl we barely knew. I keep thinking about what Emma's life has been like, Derek said quietly. Growing up with Jessica telling her that I'm her father but that we have to keep it secret. Being raised to see you as the obstacle keeping her from her real family. She's probably been absorbing toxic messages about relationships and family since she could understand language. She's also been surrounded by people who live in complete fantasy. Linda has been editing reality for years. Jessica has been playing out a romantic delusion with her own brother. Emma has no concept of normal family dynamics. Derek's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Linda. Derek, please call me. We need to discuss Emma's future. Jessica is having a difficult time, and Emma needs stability. He showed me the message, and I felt my blood pressure spike. Even after being caught in a years-long deception campaign, Linda was still trying to manipulate the situation and control the narrative. She's treating this like a custody dispute between divorced parents, I said. Not like what it actually is, the aftermath of sexual assault and systematic harassment. She probably genuinely believes her own version of events at this point. In Linda's mind, Jessica and I were meant to be together, and you were the intruder. Now that the truth is out, she's trying to salvage what she can of the fantasy. Derek's phone rang. It was Robert calling for the first time since Christmas dinner. Derek, son, we need to talk. I'm listening. Your mother is... She's not well. I don't think she fully understands what Jessica did to you, or what we've all been participating in. She keeps talking about family healing and getting everyone back together. Dad, Jessica sexually assaulted me. Mom helped her cover it up and has been systematically harassing my wife for 3 years. There's no family healing from that. I know. I'm not defending what they did. I'm just trying to explain why your mother isn't accepting reality. She's built her entire identity around maintaining this family, and she can't process that the family she's been maintaining was based on crimes and lies. Robert's voice was heavy with exhaustion and shame. I should have seen what was happening. I should have questioned Linda's obsession with family photos, Jessica's behavior around you, all of it. I failed you, Derek. I failed you both. What happens now? Derek asked. I'm filing for divorce. I can't stay married to someone who would participate in what was done to you. And I'm going to make sure Emma is protected, whatever that takes. The conversation with Robert was the first sign that not everyone in the Martinez family was completely lost to the delusion. But it also highlighted how completely the family had been destroyed by Jessica and Linda's campaign. Over the next few days, the restraining orders were processed and served. Jessica was prohibited from contacting Derek or me directly, and from coming within 500 feet of our home or workplaces. Linda was subject to similar restrictions, though she was allowed supervised contact with Derek for the purpose of discussing Emma's welfare. The legal protection felt necessary, but it also felt surreal. These were people who had been part of our lives for years, who had attended our wedding and shared holiday dinners with us. Now they were legally prohibited from being near us because of the extent of their harassment and criminal behavior. On January 10th, Maria called with an update on the criminal investigation. The police had interviewed Patricia, Robert, and several other family members who could corroborate the timeline of events. They had also obtained warrants to search Linda's computer and Jessica's phone for additional evidence. The prosecutor is taking this seriously, Maria reported. The photo manipulation evidence is so extensive and well documented that it establishes a clear pattern of harassment. Combined with the DNA evidence proving the reproductive assault, they're confident about moving forward with charges. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Derek asked. Months, at minimum. Jessica will probably be arrested within the next 2 weeks. The trial process could take 6 to 12 months, depending on whether she pleads guilty or fights the charges. And Emma? Child Services is already involved. They'll be evaluating Jessica's fitness as a parent and considering placement options. Given that you're her biological father and have never been accused of any wrongdoing, you would likely be their first choice for custody if Jessica is deemed unfit. The prospect of suddenly becoming a single father to a 5-year-old was overwhelming. Derek and I had talked about having children eventually, but not under these circumstances. Emma would come to us traumatized, confused, and possibly resentful. She would need therapy, stability, and patience, as she unlearned years of toxic messaging about family and relationships. But she was also an innocent victim in all of this, a child whose entire existence was the result of her mother's crimes, but who deserved love, protection, and a chance at a normal life. If we get custody of Emma, Derek said that evening, everything changes. Our marriage, our careers, our entire future. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the 5-year-old girl I'd met at family gatherings, who had always been polite, but distant, who had been taught to see me as temporary and unwelcome. I thought about the years of therapy she would need, the challenging questions we would have to answer as she grew older, the possibility that she might always resent us for disrupting the only family structure she'd ever known. I'm prepared to protect an innocent child from the people who created her through assault and raised her in a house of lies, I said. Whatever that takes. Derek reached for my hand. I love you for saying that. But Sarah, this won't be easy. Emma has been programmed to believe that Jessica and I belong together, that you're the obstacle to her family's happiness. Undoing that psychological damage could take years. Then we'll take years. We'll get her the best therapy available. We'll show her what a healthy family actually looks like, and we'll hope that love and stability can overcome the trauma of her early childhood. As we sat together planning for a future we'd never imagined, I realized that our Christmas dinner revelation had done more than just expose Jessica and Linda's crimes. It had forced us to define what kind of people we wanted to be, what kind of family we wanted to build, and how we would respond when innocent lives depended on our choices. The legal battles were just beginning, and the road ahead would be long and difficult. But for the first time since discovering the photo manipulation, I felt hopeful. We were finally living in reality instead of someone else's fantasy, and whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them with truth instead of lies. 3 months later, Jessica was sentenced to 18 months in prison for reproductive assault and criminal harassment. She had initially fought the charges, claiming her relationship with Derek was consensual, but the overwhelming evidence of systematic deception made her position impossible to defend. Linda received 2 years of probation and mandatory psychological counseling for her role in the harassment campaign. The judge called her photo editing operation a disturbing attempt to manipulate reality and gaslight the victim's family. She was also ordered to pay substantial damages for the emotional distress caused by years of systematic erasure. Emma came to live with us in February. The transition was heartbreaking and beautiful in equal measure. She arrived carrying a small suitcase and a worn stuffed rabbit, looking lost and confused. Her first words to me were, "Are you going to disappear now that Mommy's gone?" The question broke my heart. This 5-year-old had been taught to see relationships as temporary, to expect the people she cared about to vanish without explanation. Her entire understanding of family had been warped by Jessica's delusions and Linda's manipulations. "No, sweetheart," I told her. "I'm not going anywhere. We're going to be a family now, all 3 of us." Emma's adjustment wasn't easy. She had nightmares about being abandoned, and frequently asked when Jessica was coming home. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, the child psychologist we'd hired, explained that Emma had been living in a house where reality was constantly being rewritten to fit Jessica's fantasies. "She's never learned to trust her own perceptions," Dr. Thompson explained. "When the adults around you are constantly telling you that things are different from what you observe, you lose confidence in your ability to understand the world." Slowly, patiently, Derek and I began helping Emma distinguish between truth and the fiction she'd been raised on. We showed her real family photos, the unedited versions where I appeared alongside Derek. We explained, in age-appropriate terms, that her mother had been confused and had told her stories that weren't true. The breakthrough came in April, during Emma's 6th birthday party. We had invited Patricia, Robert, and a few of Emma's classmates. As I was helping Emma blow out her candles, she looked up at me and said, "Sarah, are you my real stepmom now?" "I'm your real stepmom," I confirmed. "And I always will be." Emma smiled, the first genuine, unreserved smile I'd seen from her since she'd come to live with us. Good. I like having a real family. Derek's healing process was different but equally important. He struggled with guilt about Emma's situation and anger about the years of his life that had been stolen by deception. Through therapy, he began to understand that he was a victim, not a participant, in Jessica's crimes. I keep thinking about all the family gatherings where I was completely oblivious to what was happening, he told me one evening. Jessica was studying you, copying you, planning to replace you, and I never noticed. You weren't supposed to notice, I reminded him. Normal people don't look for signs that their sister is romantically obsessed with them and planning reproductive assault. Your trust in your family wasn't naivete, it was normal. By summer, our new family had found its rhythm. Emma had started calling me Mom Sarah and had stopped asking about Jessica's return. Derek had learned to see our unusual beginning as a foundation for something beautiful, rather than just a traumatic disruption. Robert visited regularly, building a healthy relationship with his granddaughter for the first time. He had divorced Linda and moved to a smaller house across town. I'm learning who I am when I'm not enabling someone else's delusions, he told us. It's harder than I expected, but it's honest. Linda, meanwhile, had been required to delete all the manipulated photos from her social media and provide copies of original images to restore our family's real history. She was also prohibited from posting any photos of Emma or our family during her probation period. The most surprising development came in August when Jessica called from prison. She wanted to speak to Derek about giving up her parental rights. Permanently. I've been in therapy, she said during the supervised phone call. I'm starting to understand that what I did was wrong. Emma deserves a stable family, and I can't give her that. Derek was cautious but hopeful. Jessica's willingness to relinquish custody would make Emma's adoption process much simpler and give our daughter the security of knowing her place in our family was permanent. By the time the legal adoption was finalized in November, Emma had thrived beyond our wildest hopes. Her nightmares had stopped, her grades had improved, and she had made close friendships at school. She understood her origin story in an age-appropriate way. Her birth mother had made some very bad choices, but she was safe and loved now. The night before the adoption became official, Emma came into our bedroom carrying her stuffed rabbit. I've been thinking, she said with the solemnity only a 6-year-old can achieve. Maybe it's good that Mommy Jessica made those bad choices. Why do you think that? Derek asked, lifting her onto our bed. Because if she didn't, I wouldn't have gotten to live with you and Mom Sarah. And I wouldn't have learned what a real family is like. Looking back, I realized that the Christmas dinner confrontation changed all our lives in ways we couldn't have predicted. What started as my determination to expose photo manipulation became the catalyst for saving a child from a toxic environment, protecting Derek from ongoing abuse, and building a family based on truth instead of fantasy. Emma is 8 now, bright and confident and beautifully normal. She knows her story, the complicated, difficult truth of how she came to be. But she also knows she's loved and wanted and safe. Derek and I often talk about how different our lives might have been if I hadn't found the courage to stand up at that dinner table and demand the truth. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to let other people's lies become your reality. Sometimes you have to be willing to break everything apart in order to build something genuine. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the truth sets everyone free, even the people you never expected to save. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.